Hey, what's up, guys? It is METAGAMESGX here, and we are back to yap about Branded. And today I want to talk about Post Supreme Darkness is going to be an insane format. Everything ends up changing, so we're gonna have to end up changing things for Brandeds. So to talk about what needs to change with Branded, we have to talk about the conditions of the meta. It's not going to be a formal deck profile, so if you want to see a deck profile, please leave a like down below. If this video gets 200 likes, I'll make my post suit a deck profile for Branded. Also, make sure to check out my website down below if you want to pick up my branded spreadsheet or even some merch like this a stellar with an AK t-shirt that says Metagames GX. It's a great way to support the channel. So let's get right into it. So what exactly happens with Supreme Darkness? Currently, we are in a Ryzeal, Malice, and basically Fiendsmith meta. Now, what changes is that certain things like Twins of the Eclipse come out, and then also new support for older archetypes like Crystron that basically vaults it to almost tier 1 status. So we are going to have to take into account that there's going to be a lot more decks. But what do these new decks do? Well, it makes so the end boards are going to get a lot stronger. So I talked about last format and in the last video about how a lot of the end boards for Yu-Gi-Oh decks were getting actually kind of lower post the last ban list, with Appaloosa and Baron being banned and Snake Eyes being kneecapped and all the fire decks being basically dead at this point. But good things don't last forever, and the new meta brings in cards like I said, Twins of the Eclipse, and the Mitsurugi cards are really insane. And Abaku is just like basically the new Appaloosa for light and dark decks. In a format where the end boards are super strong, I think Branded has to run a lot of gas overall to be able to break through those boards. Like, I would say it's very similar to the Fiendsmith meta that we were in the Nationals format, where Beatrice was legal, and I said you had to run a lot of gas. I think we saw Marat run 50 card, which was pretty gassy too. So with all that being said, I do think that Branded ends up needing to change the game. We were originally running about 45 cards in our last couple builds. We are running the Azamina build still. However, I think that we have to up the deck count in order to play through these end boards. So why do we need to up the deck count to play through end boards? Because like I mentioned before, the ceiling of the end boards are getting a lot higher. So like with the Crystron, they have multiple Omni negates plus interruption through their synchro summoning on their own turn with their new main deck monster. Having only one board breaker sometimes just isn't going to be enough. And your engine obviously can work with you with Branded when you have Fallen of Albaz, you have Bystials, like I'm showing off right here, that really do actually end up helping break the board. And I do think that actually you'll still see a lot of Fiendsmith and, like I said, Mitsurugi, so the Bystials end up being pretty good. However, I think that having that 60 card build will allow you to play cards that allow you to draw into all your engine. Things like Allura Darkness, that grass looks greener, and then the Wanted engine, as we mentioned before. All of these cards help me basically draw through my 60 cards and then see like a bigger hand size than just the standard 6 going second. Or if I'm going first, it helps me play through hand traps because I'm able to play through so many, hand traps by searching through my whole deck and then sculpting my hand to how I want it to be. Choosing not to run the Jura Swarm this time around, as you guys can probably see, without the Branded Regained, because I just don't want to end up bricking on 60 cards. That's always one of the things you don't want to brick a lot of the time, so that's always a consideration. Obviously, your propensity of bricks with Branded with deck building really matters. You can run anything in Branded. You can run 60 card, you could run 40 card, you could run hand traps, you could run board breakers. You just have to be pretty smart about the deck building and look at kind of the consistency, like test ratios. As I've always recommended, you could always just run test hands on your own at home, or just run it in a simulator like YuGiOh Mega. We are running the double Quem too, because I do think just at 60 card, it like, if you guys have been seeing my Master Duel gameplay, 60 card has been actually very good over there, so that's why it has made me also revisit 60 card, because 60 card is not dead. I never said it was dead. I just think that overall last format we didn't need it when most end boards were just Desiree pass, or just like the Malice end board, which they kind of FTK you anyways if you go second. So I don't know. And Branded already had a decent matchup into Malice with its engine anyways going second, so I think it's fine. Also, these two Book of Eclipses, I'm going to have to say right now, these are just going to be two Triple Tactics talents. So we are running three Triple Tactics talents. I just don't own two other copies right now. I'm still haven't gotten them. But yeah, so I think Triple Tactics talents should be a 3 of in this format. I've been doing a lot of post-pseudo testing, and there's a lot of hand traps still between a lot. Ryzeal's still going to be the best deck. Malice is going to be the second best deck by far. I think Malice is still very good, and now they get Abaku, so it's going to be very good. But I do think that Fiendsmith Ryzeal is going to continue to be probably the best deck right next to Pure Ryzeal, and then Mitsurugi Ryzeal, as I've said in my video, I think is also going to be one of the best decks, if not the best deck. I just think it actually is kind of like branded in a certain sense, where their like ritual card is actually quite literally branded fusion. However, all these decks run a bunch of hand traps. So I think Triple Tactics Talents is always going to be live. You're always going to be drawing 2 off of that. So I do just want to let you guys know on that. Also, we do have the Diabell Star plus the Stellar. I think we only need one Diabell Star. We are not running the Pod Desires. I was going back and forth on Potted Desires. I do think Potted Desires is quite a good option in 60 cards. However, I think it's just like better overall not to just like lose random games to Pod Desires, and you can run other cards that are basically just as good as I am with Allure of Darkness. And then we also have the Wanted package. Wanted gets you a Dark as well, so I think that's pretty good. We're also running 2 Despian Tragedy, so that our Allure of Darkness can probably draw into either that or a Mercurier, or just like one of the Bestials or one of the Shrouded Dragons. I think that's really nice. And like I mentioned before, there's going to be a lot of Fiendsmith and a lot of Mitsurugi, so I think that the Bestials are very good against both of those decks. They're not quite good against Malice, but I think they quite literally are just incredible against that deck, so I think running 3 Saronir is the play. I even might want to try out like Druid Swarm, to be honest, still, but at the moment I'm just, 60 card ends up being tighter than you'd think. I've said this before, but I think actually deck building a 60 card deck is a lot like more difficult than it is a 45 to 50 card branded deck, because a lot of the time you're fitting in a lot of different engines to basically make the 60 card engine get going. Like, you can make a 60 card branded deck and it could just be dead on arrival because the ratios and the consistency is completely off. Like, a lot of people will come to my stream and they'll be like, hey, MetaGamesGX, I know you like the 60 card build, but it bricks for me. And then I take a look at their build. I'm like, well, there's 5 different things you're doing here that basically make it so that your consistency is going to be really kneecapped at the beginning of your deck. So you always have to, like I mentioned, talk about think about the propensity of bricks and take your losses where you can on the cards you don't necessarily need, and then keep the bricks that you need. I think Double Tragedy is a good brick to have when you have Allure of Darkness in your deck, so that you can always go +1 off of Allure. But also at the end of the day, we're also running the Grass Looks Greener, so Tragedy is also very good and synergizes with that. Also, we're running Wanted, which also synergizes with Grass, just in case we mill, we could get the draw 1. But I think what is really also nice is that Diabell Star can pitch a card from field or hand, so you could pitch a Tragedy or a Saronir to help extend your combo, which I find really interesting, because a lot of the time just running the triple Saronir means that a lot of your hands, as long as you have a way to discard, you're probably getting to your branded fusion. So I think that the Diabell Star giving me another leverage point to discard the Saronir, discard the Despian Tragedy, is really good and really underrated, and an interaction I really haven't seen anyone talk about with branded and Azamina. We do have the Ido right here. I think Ido is going to be one of those cards that you have to run this format, because Mitsurugi Ryzeal, Malice, and Fiendsmith Ryzeal, I mean, not so much Fiendsmith Ryzeal, but it's basically those other decks with lots of crackback and lots of push if you don't kill them, essentially. And it's really hard to kill Mitsurugi Ryzeal. It's really hard to kill Malice. So I think that overall, you're going to need the Ido to basically lock them going second, so this thing is going to stay in the deck. I also think Wanted helps in a 60 card build, because this card is quite literally a +1 by drawing. So when you have the Allures and the Wanted, and then also you're running the 3 Triple Tactics Talents, you have so much draw ability in this deck. And that's really important when you're running 60, so you can actually sift through your deck and get to your engine, and like I said, get to those hands of 7 to 9 cards essentially. And you're always winning the game when you have a branded hand of 7 to 8 cards basically going second or even going first. So I think that but your biggest enemy, like the elephant in the room, as as we've been going through this, is Droll and Lockbird. But I think overall, Droll and Lockbird will not be really ran as often as you guys will think, because Mulcharmy's in the game. Mulcharmy's one of the best hand traps overall without Maxx being in the game. So I think that with that being said, that we're actually going to end up not having to worry about it as much as you'd think. That yes, this build kind of can hard die to Droll, but I do think overall you can play through it with things like Branded and High Spirits, Wanted. Branded is always about sequencing. I think that sequencing is always extremely important with any technical based deck with board breaking, and also just like a deck that especially doesn't run hand traps, so you have to make sure that your normal summons, your special summons, and then your extenders really matter when you're playing them, so that you can actually board break and get to where you need to be at the same time. So that's just sequencing 101, and that's what Branded I think really teaches somebody. So if you're ever trying to learn how to board break or sequence like going second, I think play Branded for a bit and you'll kind of learn it off the rip. And for Mitsurugi Ryzeal, as you guys have probably seen on my channel, if not, go check out the combo guide. You want to see what that deck does. You got to know what it does so you can be prepared for it. Like I mentioned, having double Bestial is really good against them, or just like a Bestial plus a board breaker. So just like having the ability to have like Droplet. I also have the Triple Tactics Talents to board break, and then the Grasslook Screener to be able to get into things is really important. I also think that siding into board breakers is going to be very imperative as well. I'm thinking about evenly matched, if anything, for the side deck. It's not final, and nothing's final on this list, by the way, guys, but we will do the final deck list if this video does get to 200 likes. So why am I still running the Azamina package in a format with Detonator? And also, does the Azamina package change post Suda? So I think that's another good question to generally round this conversation off with. I think that overall, even though Detonator is going to be in the game, I think having the ability to have a draw engine that still baits all the hand traps in the game is going to outweigh anything that Detonator could really threaten in our deck. So with that being the case, I do want to end up still keeping the Azamina cards in my deck. I think that Wanted is a wonderful card that helps me play through certain hand traps, and then also establishes a way to always play through Impermanent Ash, and then also get a draw, and then put bodies in the graveyard, such as like a fusion for Mirror Jade, so I don't have to go Lubellion and discard a card. I think there's lots of synergies also with Diabell Star sending cards to the graveyard, so that you can end up triggering things like a Stellar of the White Forest, or even triggering things like Saronir and Despian Tragedy in the graveyard to banish itself to reset a branded spell or trap card. Also, post Suda, we do get some new Azamina cards. We get Elzat Azamina of the White Forest. I do think that this card is technically playable in Branded. However, I don't think it's quite optimal. I was thinking there would be some nice combo lines, and there are, but they all kind of involve not really anything that's going to be better than what the current package of Deception plus Wanted and Diabell Star can do in Branded. Now, it's up to you if you want to run the Diabell Star overall, because I think Diabell Star is one of those cards that if you get impermed on Diabell Star and you don't have a Cartesia, you can kind of almost lose from there if you don't have any way to extend. But obviously, if you only had the Wanted package, you were going to probably lose that game anyway. So I think that Diabell Star ends up being more or less a way to bait hand traps, and I think that's totally fine. We're only running one, so we aren't ever going to brick on it. We aren't running Pod of Desire, so we can't just banish it. So I think still running the one is worth it, in my opinion, so we can still have just a dark that we can search off of Wanted. I think it just makes Wanted a lot better, obviously. Wanted is just an incredible card, and you can also just spin back the Diabell Star in a few different ways so that the engine is always live. I think Deception always being a card that can come back in the end phase as well if you don't spin it back is really important, because you can always have basically the Ilya Sylvia on board. And now I guess we could get out the extra deck too. I believe this main deck might be at 61 cards, by the way, so if you guys want to comment down below why I should cut from this, let me know. So yeah, no, we can go into the extra deck. I think that it's kind of not changed a whole lot, but I do want to show you guys what I would potentially change. I do think that 2 Mirror Jades is something to consider, because Mirror Jade's just going to be your best friend this format. I think Mirror Jade is incredible. Its banish ability just gets cards out of rotation, and also being able to loop it. I think having 2 is going to be very imperative. We do have the 2 Guignol. I do think that we can probably cut 1 Guignol for 2 Mirror Jade at the end of the day, though. And that's like the change I would make, because I think that we are still running the Ido, but I don't think that it sanctions like running the double Guignol very well. So like I think that it happens like with when we run Grass Looks Greener, like we run Foolish Burial, we have a lot of ways to get to the puppet or the Ido in the graveyard besides just branded fusion. So I think overall that means that we don't really need to rely on the double Guignol. If we're going double Guignol, that means we aren't going into the Lad most likely. I think Lad is our like best card in our deck, honestly. I think this card literally solos. If you guys have seen any of my streams or my Master Duel streams, whenever I go first and I put this up on the board, it's an auto win. This card's basically an auto win. It's very difficult to be able to play through this. You basically have to be going against like Sky Striker, and then Sky Striker can't do anything about it. I also think Masquerade needs to be in the side deck, but I'm not sure if I would ever main it because we are not running Super Poly anymore, so this will likely also be axed in the final build. I think Despia and Quertus is definitely still very good and still very much required. I think Stapelia will get cut for a Chaos Star Source Dragon so that we can make our Lad lines a bit better. Also, it just gives us more ability to pop. I'm going to keep the Guardian Chimera and the Borreload. I think a lot of people are cutting this card, and I think that's incorrect personally, but I also think that Branded's quite freeform, and you won't quite get punished for like things like that. And also, I don't think it's necessarily always the worst thing. It's just, you know, if you don't, I think Guardian Chimera's genericness also really does play a part in why I still continue to run it over things like Chaos Star Source. But like I mentioned, I think we can cut things like Stapelia potentially without running the Super Poly anymore. This card was just very good for Super Poly. Why am I not running Super Poly anymore? Because Super Poly is very good into certain boards, but overall, it's not doing the most against like the Mitsurugi board. It's not doing the most against Malice. It can do the most against Malice, so that's maybe like why we'll side it for Malice. But overall, I think right now Super Poly is not what I'm running, but that could very well change in the future. I do need to do more pseudo testing, but Super Poly, I think overall the best board breakers are going to be Book of Eclipse and Droplet, because Book of Eclipse demands an answer from basically every deck outside of Malice, and then also same with Droplet, but Droplet also covers Malice as long as you're not under Shifter, and they're currently not really main decking Shifter, because like especially if they're like main decking Abaku, you know, they aren't trying to banish cards, so they're trying to go into, you know, Abaku, loop a Nightmare Griffin, which, you know, if you guys know how that works, basically they'll have a Firewall Dragon plus a Nightmare Griffin, so you can't activate any effects, and then your opponent can basically bounce some cards. So you obviously have to have correct board breakers for those. I think Droplet cooks that board. I also think that, like I said, Super Poly can potentially do that too, but that's why we will side it most likely. I do think it's probably mandatory to side, but, you know, I do have the side deck right here, I guess, that we could also talk about a little bit. I still think like 2 fusion duplication is going to be quite necessary just for your going first board. I'm very much always on the train when I'm running 60 card branded to run draw cards, because you need to have options for basically. Also, here's the Chaos Star Source, by the way, and then a Garura. Also, Alba Lenatus is something that we could potentially run. I just think it's not very necessary this format. Also, I'm not thinking Garura is going to be good, because if Mitsurugi Raziel is in the format, I just think that Maximusing blind is going to be terrible game one. You basically let them win the game if you do that. I also think Triple Tactics Talents is probably the best board breaker overall, but it also in this deck is mostly going to be a take 2. I mean, if you can take the Desiree, better yet, because if you take their Desiree, you can obviously just use it on your own turn, so that's pretty cool. So yeah, no, I think that also Gizmek Uka is going to be very broken. Shout out to my man Yuri Diaz, who really came up with this goo with Brotar and Crabs. So basically, you can go Uka effect, and then against Malice, when they special summon out a Malice from deck, like with their Malice trap, and then you can chain Uka once they special summon out a Dark from deck, and then chain Uka effect, target the Dark, and then you can go Uka effect, target Brotar, and then you can search a Dark Dragon, you can search the Phantasme, and at this point, they're already mostly into their combo, so you're going to be drawing 3 to 4 cards off of Phantasme. They're going to likely have 2 to 3 links on board, so this is a really good combo, so I did just want to mention that. Also, obviously, you can do the standard combo with Ecclesia to turn 0 Mirror Jade, or turn 0 get, you know, idle lock your opponent if you draw it. Like I said, I have all these combos on my channel and then also on my spreadsheet. Go check them out down below. So I did just want to mention that. And then, like I said, for the Krishan decks, they do end up ending on like Cyber Dragon Infinity plus another Omni Negate. Sometimes I've seen some builds run Regulus, so I do think Droplet, Book of Eclipse, so once again, cooks these boards, Triple Tactics, Talents, Thrust, just like these are what you're going to need to see. Is evenly matched good into post-Suda format. I think it continues to be kind of mid because you don't want against Malice. Malice can just completely play through it and just do White Binder plays anyway. And then also, it's very good into Ryzeal, but like I think that between the Desiree and then also the Mitsurugi Omni Negate, it's not going to be quite good. It's okay against pure Ryzeal, but I think they still end on Detonator, so you still have to always deal with that. I also think having some going first options are going to be pretty important outside of just, running the fusion duplication. So you could also just run, Nadir Servant, like I mentioned. You could just like not opt to run the Maximus so you don't just randomly lose to Mitsurugi Ryzeal game 1. I think you could also run the Solemn cards. Solemn Strike is just good. Scolding is fine too. Judgment's like a little bit worse, I think, in this deck. So I'd go between the Scolding and the Strike. I think Strike is probably just better overall. And then Artifact Lancia, you're going to have to run this in your deck. Should you run Chaos Hunter? I don't love Chaos Hunter. I think you could run the Mulcharmy Nihilus if you're really worried about it. But I do think that Mulcharmy Purrely is really good against the new Malice variants post-Suda, where they're running like more Bestials, so they're always summoning from hand. So I think Lancia and then running that plus Fuwalos is just going to be fine in my opinion. But Chaos Hunter could be something you could consider. I just think they end up always just outing it anyways. Fuwalos, like I said, it should probably be in everyone's side deck post Suda. You just kind of need this card going second with all like the FTK pseudo and FTK end boards in the game. So you just like need something to combat that, or else you're just kind of losing game if you're going second against like a lot of decks like Malice. And then one Feather Duster. This is also like the argument not to run 60. So like I'm not like dead set I'm running 60, guys. I'm not just like trying to say you have to run 60 this format, but I do think that 60, there is a logic to it, and so far through testing it's been quite nice against Malice and Ryzeal post Suda, so I do think that's something to consider. Also, Feather Duster is like the best board breaker post Suda. So yeah, guys, what did you think about this video? What do you guys think? Are you guys running branded post Suda? Are you guys running a different deck? And what do you guys think of branded's potential in 2025? We just did another yapping about branded video. I'll keep up the series if you guys want to see more. Like I said, 200 likes. Let me know what you guys thought about this, what you guys think about this upcoming format. Are you excited? Any upcoming events? Please let me know down below. Check out my website. Check out my TCG Player affiliate link. Subscribe today. Leave a like down below. And we will be seeing you guys later. Also, join the Discord. Join the best community in the Yu-Gi-Oh community. Bye-bye.